Vivian handed me her phone at our kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning, unlocked, and I saw the text from RS. Can't wait to tell my sister about our news. I was teaching constitutional law when my marriage ended. I just didn't know it yet. The lecture hall at Harvard Law holds 200 students, but that morning only 87 showed up. It was February, that dead zone between winter break enthusiasm and spring semester burnout. I stood at the podium with my notes on marital contracts spread before me, and I remember thinking how strange it was that I'd been teaching this material for 15 years without ever really living it. Contracts bind parties to terms, I told them. Covenants bind them to character. The question you need to ask yourselves, the question your future clients will need to ask is this: which did you enter? A student in the third row raised her hand. I recognized her. Maria, something sharp as a knife, always asked the hard questions. Professor Pierce, what if only one person brings character to the marriage? I paused. Behind me on the credenza sat the photograph I kept in my office. Me, at 26, standing beside Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her Supreme Court chambers. Her signature was scrawled across the bottom in black Sharpie. To Jonathan, may you teach others what you taught me. Law is reason free from passion. Then it was never a covenant, I said. It was a con. The students laughed. A few typed it into their laptops. I saw one girl in the back row smile, Emma, my daughter, 17 years old and visiting my class during her school's reading week. She was proud of me that morning. I could see it in her face. I didn't know she'd be sitting in my lecture hall 6 weeks later, watching me teach the same lesson again, but that time I'd have learned it myself. The class ended at 10:15. I gathered my notes, that burgundy leather moleskin journal I'd carried for years, coffee ring stain on the front cover, pages full of my handwriting in blue fountain pen. As I walked across campus back to my office, my phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. Left early for partner meeting. Phone's on counter if you need me. That's when everything started unraveling, though I didn't know it then. I got home at 11:30. The Brattle Street townhouse was quiet. Faculty housing, brick, and history, the kind of place that makes you feel like you're living inside an institution. Emma was upstairs getting ready for school. I could hear her moving around, that particular rhythm of teenage preparation. The phone was exactly where Vivian said it would be. On the kitchen counter, space gray iPhone in a black leather case. But what Vivian didn't mention, what she couldn't have known I'd notice, was that the case had the First Circuit Court seal embossed on it. Not Ropes and Gray's logo, not Harvard Law, the federal court seal. And the phone wasn't locked. The screen was still lit when I picked it up. The notification was right there, 3 short pulse vibrations I felt in my palm. Contact name RS. The text said, "Can't wait to tell my sister about our news. She'll be perfect for this." I stood there holding the phone. It was warm, like it was still alive with their conversation. The leather case smelled expensive, that rich smell that costs money. The screen protector had a spiderweb crack spreading from the top right corner. She'd never fixed it. My hands started shaking. RS. Who was RS? What news? What sister? I heard the shower shut off upstairs. Vivian was home. I'd forgotten. Partner meeting must have been canceled. I set the phone down carefully, exactly where I'd found it. My fingers left no mark on the screen, but I felt like I'd just committed a crime. Like I'd broken into someone else's life and found out it wasn't the life I thought I was living. Emma came down the stairs carrying papers. "Dad, can you read my Yale essay? I finished the new draft last night." I smiled at her. Or I tried to smile. I don't know what my face looked like, but Emma didn't seem to notice anything wrong. She was glowing. That particular 17-year-old sunshine that comes from believing the world is about to open up for you. The essay was printed on standard office paper, 3 sheets stapled in the top left corner. Red pen marks everywhere, her handwriting scratching out words, adding phrases in the margins. There was a coffee ring on the bottom right corner where she'd spilled her latte that morning. The corners were dog-eared from being carried in her backpack. The prompt was printed at the top in bold. Describe a household where you learned your values. Read it out loud, I said. My voice sounded normal. That's the thing about being a lawyer. You learn to control your voice, even when everything inside you is screaming. Emma sat at the kitchen table, pushed her dark hair behind her ears, and started reading. I learned integrity from watching my father teach students that contracts bind behavior, but covenants bind character. He lives that every day. Growing up in a home where law and love coexisted, I saw what it means to have principles that don't bend when it's convenient. My parents built their marriage like they built their careers, on mutual respect, shared values, and unwavering commitment. That's why I want to study law, because I've seen what it looks like when people mean what they promise. She looked up at me, eyes bright. What do you think? Behind her, I could see Vivian's phone still sitting on the counter. The screen had gone dark. It's beautiful, sweetheart, I said. Yale would be crazy not to take you. Vivian emerged from upstairs then, hair still damp from the shower, wearing one of her perfectly tailored work dresses. She glanced at Emma at the papers spread on the table. Mom, aren't you proud? Emma asked. I finally finished my Yale essay. Vivian picked up her phone from the counter without looking at it. Very impressive, sweetie. She didn't ask to read it. She didn't ask what it was about. She scrolled through something on her screen, those 3 short pulses again, that apex notification sound she'd never changed. And then she was gone. Door closing, car starting. Emma's face fell. She's just busy, I said. But Emma wasn't stupid. Neither was I. If you've ever written something personal, an essay, a letter, a speech, and had someone you love barely look up from their phone while you shared it, just type invisible in the comments. Emma felt it that morning. You're not alone in that feeling. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to figure out who RS could be. I'm a constitutional law professor. I teach people how to think logically, how to build arguments from evidence. But that afternoon, I couldn't think straight. At 4 o'clock, I walked to the Harvard Law Faculty Lounge. I needed coffee. I needed to see another human being. I needed to stop feeling like I was losing my mind. Professor Margaret Tillerson was there, 58 years old, constitutional law legend, the woman who'd mentored me when I first started teaching. She took one look at my face and poured me coffee without asking. You look terrible, Jonathan, she said. Didn't sleep well, I lied. Margaret had that way older academics have. She could see through you like you were transparent. She handed me a copy of the Boston Globe, folded to the Metro section. Have you seen this? She asked. The headline was in 48-point font. Judge Strauss, considered for Supreme Court nomination. Profile of the man behind the gavel. There was a photo. Judge Richard Hamilton Strauss. 52 years old, distinguished gray at the temples, standing with his wife and 2 adult children at some Kennedy Center gala. The article was glowing. Legal brilliance. Scalia's protege. First Circuit Court of Appeals. Potential Supreme Court nominee. And there, buried in the 7th paragraph, was a quote from a senior Boston attorney praising his brilliance and character. The newspaper smelled like ink, acrid, chemical. The pages rustled loudly as I turned them. My fingers got those gray smudges newspapers always leave. Jonathan, Margaret said quietly. She leaned in close. The faculty lounge wasn't empty. 3 other professors sat across the room, grading papers, oblivious. I saw Vivian having lunch with Judge Strauss last week at Legal Seafoods. Very intimate? My blood went cold. They've worked on cases together, I said automatically. Defense mode, lawyer mode. She argues before him sometimes. I know, Margaret said. That's why it bothered me. R.S. Richard Strauss, the Supreme Court nominee, the man whose court seal was embossed on my wife's phone case. I got home at 6:30. Emma was doing homework in her room. The house was empty, quiet. I walked upstairs to our bedroom and I did something I'd never done in 20 years of marriage. I looked through Vivian's things. In the bathroom trash, under some tissues and cotton pads, I found a box. White retail box, blue and green labeling. Identigene DNA paternity test. The plastic wrapper was still sealed. There was a CVS receipt stapled to it, dated 3 days ago. Price, $129.99. The box had weight to it. The plastic wrapper crinkled when I picked it up. It smelled like nothing. Just plastic and cardboard and the faint chemical sweetness of thermal receipt paper. Vivian was pregnant. I stood there in our bathroom holding a paternity test kit, and I realized I'd never asked her about being pregnant because she'd never told me. How many weeks? When? With who? I heard the front door open downstairs. Vivian was home. I put the box back in the trash, covered it exactly how I'd found it, walked downstairs like a man walking to his own execution. Vivian was in the library. That's what we called it. The book-lined room where I kept my law collection, where we used to drink wine and talk about cases. She was pouring herself a glass of Cabernet. "We need to talk," I said. She didn't even turn around. "About what?" "About RS, about Judge Strauss, about why you have a paternity test in our bathroom trash." The wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. She turned to face me then, and the woman I saw wasn't my wife. Not the woman I married. Her face was cold, calculating, the face she used in courtrooms when she was destroying opposing counsel. "You went through my things," she said. "You left your phone unlocked." "So you read my texts?" "Just the one that was on the screen when I picked it up." She laughed. Actually laughed. It was a sound without warmth. "Oh, Jonathan, you're so naive. This marriage was always just a contract. Strategic partnership for two ambitious lawyers. I needed the stability. You needed the social capital. And now..." She set down the wine glass. "I'm terminating the agreement." The words hit me like physical blows. "A contract," I repeated. "What did you think it was? Love?" She said it like it was funny. "Richard is going to the Supreme Court. I'll be a federal judge within 2 years. You're just a teacher, Jonathan. You stand in front of students and theorize about law while people like me actually practice it." "And the baby?" "Is none of your business. It's mine. Mine and Richard's." "You argued cases before him," I said. My voice was shaking now. "While you were sleeping with him. That's judicial ethics violation. That's smart strategy," she interrupted. "I won those cases, didn't I? And now I'm positioned exactly where I need to be." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I didn't recognize the woman standing in my library. "Emma wrote her Yale essay about us," I said quietly, "about integrity, about how we built our marriage on mutual respect and shared values." For the first time, something flickered across Vivian's face, but it wasn't guilt. It was irritation. "Emma will be fine. She's resilient, and honestly, Jonathan, she'll be better off with a mother who has actual power instead of a father who just talks about having principles." I should have said something cutting, something devastating. But all I could think about was Emma upstairs, doing her homework, believing her family was real. "Get out," I said. "This is my house too. Get out, Vivian, now, before I say something I can't take back." She picked up her wine glass, drained it, and smiled. "I'll be at the Four Seasons. My lawyer will be in touch about the separation agreement. I suggest you get yourself one too. Though knowing you, you probably didn't bother with a prenup. Too unromantic, right?" She walked past me, stopped at the doorway. "Oh, and Jonathan, don't bother trying to hurt Richard's nomination. You have no proof of anything. It's your word against a federal judge and a senior partner at a major law firm. Who do you think they'll believe? The door closed behind her. I stood there in the library for, I don't know how long. Long enough that the light outside changed. Long enough that Emma came downstairs and found me sitting on the floor, back against the bookshelf, staring at nothing. "Dad." Her voice was small, scared. "Where's Mom?" "She had to go to a work thing," I lied. "Last minute, she'll be back soon." I don't know if Emma believed me. At 11:47 that night, after Emma was asleep, I called Rachel Kim Foster. She'd been my student 10 years ago. Now she was one of the top divorce attorneys in Boston, smart as hell and absolutely ruthless when she needed to be. "Rachel," I said when she answered, "I need you to read a document I wrote 20 years ago. I think I protected myself and didn't even know it." "What kind of document?" She sounded alert. Lawyers never really sleep. "A prenuptial agreement. I drafted it as an academic exercise before Vivian and I got married. She insisted we have one, said it was the smart thing for two lawyers to do. I wrote it, we signed it, and then I filed it away and forgot it existed." "Send it to me," Rachel said. "I'll call you back in 30 minutes. I found the prenup in my home office file cabinet, 67 pages bound in a Harvard crimson folder, the expensive kind of paper, ivory linen with a watermark. It had those little colored tabs, yellow for assets, blue for infidelity, green for custody. The binding crackled when I opened it. It hadn't been touched in years. It smelled like old law library, leather and ink and time. I scanned it and sent it to Rachel. 28 minutes later, my phone rang. "Jonathan." Rachel's voice had something in it I couldn't quite identify. "Section 14C. Did you read Section 14C? "I don't remember what that is." "In the event of adultery proven by preponderance of evidence, the offending party forfeits all claims to marital property acquired during marriage and pays the non-offending party liquidated damages of $500,000. The words didn't make sense at first. "I wrote that?" I said. "You wrote that. You notarized it. Vivian signed it. 2 witnesses. It's fully enforceable under Massachusetts law." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The sound came out of me like something broken. "I protected myself," I said. "I was 24 years old, writing a prenup as an academic exercise, and I protected 44-year-old me from a betrayal I couldn't even imagine." "Jonathan," Rachel said, and now I could identify the tone in her voice. It was satisfaction, the sound of a lawyer who just found the winning argument. "Your wife just made a very expensive mistake." I didn't sleep that night. How could I? At 6 in the morning, I was in my Harvard office going through files I hadn't touched in months, looking for anything that might help, looking for patterns I'd missed. That's when I found it. The Harvard Law Review article. Manuscript pages, 47 total, double-spaced in Times New Roman. The title page read, "When Marital Contracts Fail, a Study in Enforcement and Ethics" by Professor Jonathan Edward Pierce and Associate Vivian C. Pierce. The pages still had that printer-warm smell, even though they were dated June 2023, 18 months ago. Red editorial marks covered them, my handwriting, notes in the margins, suggested revisions. The paper had that slight curl at the edges that comes with age. I'd completely forgotten about this article. We were going to co-author it, submit it to the Harvard Law Review, add to both our publication records. David Chen found me at 7:30 staring at those pages. He knocked twice on my office door frame, came in carrying 2 coffees from Tata. "You look like hell," he said. David was 39, evidence professor, my closest friend on faculty. "Margaret called me last night, said you might need someone." I handed him the article. "Vivian and I were co-authoring this. Look at the date." David scanned the first page. His eyebrows went up when he read our thesis statement aloud. "Marital contracts are only as enforceable as the character of those who sign them." Jesus, Jonathan, the irony. When did she stop contributing? I asked. David flipped through the pages. All the edits were in my handwriting, none in Vivian's. He checked the file metadata on my computer. Last edit by Vivian was June 2023, 14 months ago. He looked at me. When did the affair start? Based on the phone records Rachel's subpoenaing, Margaret saw them together in February, but the texts go back. I did the math. 14 months. We sat there in silence. She stopped working on an article about marital ethics, David said slowly. The exact month she started sleeping with a federal judge whose cases she was arguing. I started laughing again, that same broken sound from last night. I wrote our thesis, David, only as enforceable as the character of those who signed them. I've been teaching this to students for 15 years, and I never saw it in my own marriage. That's because you have character, David said. You assumed she did too. At 9 o'clock, my phone rang. Dean Patricia Whitmore's assistant. The dean needed to see me immediately. Dean Whitmore's office was on the top floor of Hauser Hall. Leather chairs, mahogany desk, walls lined with photographs of every Harvard law dean going back to Roscoe Pound. She'd been dean for 6 years. Smart, political, protective of the institution above everything. She didn't stand when I came in. Jonathan, sit. I sat. I received a formal complaint this morning from Vivian Pierce. She's alleging that you're experiencing a mental health crisis. She's requested that the school place you on medical leave for your own well-being and the safety of students. The words were so absurd I almost laughed. Patricia, my wife is having an affair with federal judge Richard Strauss. She's pregnant with his child. When I discovered this, she told me our marriage was always just a contract and she's terminating the agreement. Now she's trying to paint me as unstable to control the narrative. Dean Whitmore's face remained neutral. That careful blankness administrator's perfect. Do you have evidence of this affair? Phone records being subpoenaed as we speak. 2,847 text messages over 14 months. And the pregnancy? I found a paternity test kit in our bathroom. She admitted it. Said the baby is hers and Judge Strauss's. The dean folded her hands on her desk. Jonathan, I need to ask you this directly. Are you stable? Can you continue teaching? I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman I'd known for 6 years, who'd approved my tenure, who'd celebrated with champagne when my textbook became the standard in constitutional law courses nationwide. Patricia, I'm more stable than my wife's ethics. Check the timing of her case arguments at First Circuit against when she started sleeping with the judge hearing them. Every case she won before him is potentially tainted. This isn't a mental health crisis. This is a constitutional one. Something shifted in her face. You're saying she argued cases before Judge Strauss while having an affair with him? That's exactly what I'm saying. Dean Whitmore reached for her phone. I need to make some calls. Jonathan, if what you're telling me is true, this has implications far beyond your marriage. But if you're wrong, I'm not wrong. My attorney is Rachel Kim Foster. She'll have documentation by end of day. Rachel Kim Foster, the dean repeated, your former student. The best divorce attorney in Boston. I taught her well. I left the dean's office and walked straight to Rachel's firm on Federal Street. She was waiting for me in a glass-walled conference room, her paralegal beside her with a laptop and stacks of printed documents. We got the phone records, Rachel said without preamble. Jonathan, sit down. I sat. 2,847 text messages between Vivian and Richard Strauss over 14 months. That part you knew, but look at this. She spread documents across the conference table. Vivian's case calendar from Ropes and Gray, Judge Strauss's court schedule from First Circuit, and a spreadsheet cross-referencing them. The paralegal, a young woman named Jessica, highlighted sections with yellow marker. The sound of that marker squeaking across paper made my stomach turn. Case argued February 12, 2024. Jessica said. Vivian Pierce, representing the plaintiff, Judge Strauss presiding. Rachel pointed to the phone records. First text with romantic content, February 10th, 2024, 2 days before the case. Case argued May 3rd, Jessica continued. Vivian Pierce again. Rachel pulled out a credit card statement. Hotel charge, Boston Harbor Hotel, May 2nd through May 3rd. Vivian's corporate card. Case argued October 8th. Rachel showed me a text message. The words were burned into my vision. Can't wait to see you argue tomorrow. You're brilliant. R. Dated October 7th. I couldn't breathe. She didn't just cheat on me, I said. My voice sounded far away. She corrupted the federal judiciary. Yes, Rachel said. Every case she won before him, and Jonathan, she won all 3, is now questionable. If opposing counsel finds out a romantic relationship existed during litigation, they have grounds to appeal, to question whether judicial impartiality was compromised. This kills Strauss's Supreme Court nomination. I said, it should, if it gets out. I looked up at her. What do you mean, if? Rachel glanced at her paralegal, then back to me. Jonathan, you need to understand what you're sitting on. This isn't just divorce ammunition. This is a scandal that could reach the Senate Judiciary Committee. Judge Richard Strauss is being vetted for the Supreme Court right now. If this information becomes public, he should never sit on any court again, I said, and Vivian should be disbarred. Probably yes to both. But Rachel leaned forward. Strauss has resources, power, he'll fight, and he'll use every weapon he has, including Emma. What does Emma have to do with this? Everything. She's applying to Yale. Early decision deadline is in 10 weeks. If this turns into a public scandal... My office phone rang. I ignored it. It rang again. Rachel nodded. I answered. Professor Pierce, this is Judge Strauss's clerk. The judge requests a meeting with you this afternoon, 2 o'clock at the courthouse. I don't think that's appropriate, I said. Well, the judge insists. He says it's urgent. I looked at Rachel. She nodded. Fine, 2 o'clock. I met Judge Richard Hamilton Strauss in a hallway outside his courtroom. Not his chambers, somewhere semi-public, clerks passing by, court officers, witnesses. He was exactly as I'd imagined from the newspaper photo. Distinguished gray temples, expensive suit, the kind of face that photographs well for confirmation hearings. Professor Pierce, he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. I think we need to discuss the situation rationally. There's nothing to discuss, Your Honor. You slept with my wife while she argued cases before you. That's judicial misconduct. His jaw tightened. Be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. I have phone records, hotel receipts, a pregnancy. What exactly can't I prove? You have nothing that definitively establishes impropriety. And even if you did, he stepped closer, lowered his voice. Think about Emma. Your daughter's applying to Yale. If this becomes public, if my name gets dragged through the mud, it affects her too. The daughter of a bitter professor who tried to destroy a Supreme Court nominee? How do you think that plays in New Haven? My hands clenched into fists. Are you threatening my daughter? I'm protecting her future. Stay quiet, and I'll make sure Vivian doesn't make this divorce any harder than it needs to be. Make sure Emma's Yale application gets considered favorably. I have friends on the admissions committee. You're bribing me. I'm offering you a path that protects everyone. Your daughter gets into Yale. Vivian gets a clean divorce. I continue my career. Everyone wins. I looked at this man, federal judge, Supreme Court nominee, standing in a courthouse hallway threatening a 16-year-old girl to cover up his ethical violations. Your Honor, I said quietly, I'm a law professor. I teach students to think, to reason, to follow evidence to its logical conclusion. And what I'm thinking right now is this. You just threatened a minor to cover judicial corruption. Should I think more about that? Because I teach a whole seminar on legal ethics. His face went pale. You're making a mistake, Pierce. No, Your Honor. You made the mistake 14 months ago in a Boston Harbor hotel room while my wife was preparing to argue a case before you. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard him call out, "You'll regret this." I didn't look back. Strauss just gave Jonathan an impossible choice. Stay silent and protect Emma's Yale dreams, or expose the corruption and risk her future. If you were Jonathan, what would you do? Type protect if you'd stay silent for your daughter. Type expose if you'd tell the truth no matter what. This is the choice that defines character. What's yours? There's no wrong answer here. Jonathan had to choose between being a good father and being an honest man. The hardest part? Both choices come from love. I got home at 5:30. Emma was in the kitchen, backpack on the table, looking at her phone with a confused expression. "Dad," she said when I walked in, "Mom's guidance counselor called the school. She told them you're having problems. She said they should monitor my well-being." My heart stopped. "Emma, are you and Mom getting divorced?" I could have lied, should have lied, protected her for just a little longer, but I looked at my daughter, 17 years old, smart as hell, about to write essays about integrity, and I couldn't do it. "Yes," I said, "we are." She nodded slowly, like she'd known, like she'd been waiting for confirmation. "Because of someone else?" "Yes." "Who?" I didn't answer, couldn't answer, not yet. Emma walked past me, started upstairs, stopped halfway. "The essay I wrote," she said without turning around, "about our family, about integrity and shared values. It's all a lie, isn't it?" "No, sweetheart, you learned those values. They're real. They're not from where you thought." She went to her room, closed the door. 20 minutes later, I heard her shower running. I went upstairs to check on her. Needed to say something, needed to be present. The bathroom door was cracked open, steam coming out. That's when I saw it, in the hallway, on the floor outside the bathroom door, like it had fallen from the trash can when Emma took it out. The paternity test kit, white retail box, blue and green labeling, Identigene DNA paternity test, still in its plastic wrapper, unopened, and Emma's bedroom door opened. She stood there, wet hair, wrapped in a towel, holding her phone. Her face was streaked with tears and something worse than tears. Knowledge. The kind of knowledge that destroys innocence. "Dad," she whispered. She held up her phone. I Googled Judge Richard Strauss Boston. He's married. He has kids, and Her voice broke. "He's being nominated for the Supreme Court." She looked down at the paternity test kit on the floor. "Is this Mom's?" she asked. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. "Dad, why would Mom need a paternity test?" The world narrowed to this moment, this hallway, my daughter's face, the choice I had to make. "Because," I said slowly, "Mom is pregnant, and the baby isn't mine." Emma's face crumpled, completely crumpled. "With him? With the judge?" I nodded. She made a sound I'd never heard her make before. Animal, wounded. She dropped her phone. It clattered on the hardwood floor. And then she was running to her room, slamming the door, and I heard the lock click. "Emma!" I knocked. "Emma, please, let me in." "Go away!" Her voice was shattered. "Just go away." I sat on the floor outside her locked door, back against the wall, listening to her sob on the other side. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough that the sun set, long enough that the house went dark, and I didn't bother turning on lights. At 2 a.m, I gave up, went to my study, turned on the desk lamp, sat in the leather chair, surrounded by 20 years of law books. My textbook was right there on the shelf. Marital contracts and constitutional principles, dark blue binding with my name in gold letters. used in 70% of law schools nationwide. My life's work, I pulled it down, opened to Chapter 7, the fundamental premise of good faith. I'd written this 10 years ago. I read my own words aloud to the empty room. The fundamental premise of marital contracts is good faith. Parties enter freely, honestly, with mutual respect. Without good faith, a marital contract is merely a business agreement masquerading as human connection. And business agreements, no matter how well drafted, cannot sustain the weight of a life built together. I closed the book. I taught 50,000 students about good faith. I said to no one, to the darkness, to God, if God was listening. She didn't have it from day one. What does that make me, a fraud or a fool? Behind me, on the credenza, Justice Ginsburg looked out from her photograph. Law is reason free from passion. But Ruth, I said to the photograph, this requires both. Reason to enforce the law, passion to protect my daughter. A soft knock on the door. I looked up. Emma stood in the doorway. Red eyes, my old Harvard sweatshirt 3 sizes too big, bare feet on the hardwood floor. It makes you human, Dad, she said quietly, and that's more than she'll ever be. I started crying. I couldn't help it. 44 years old, constitutional law professor, and I was crying in my study while my 17-year-old daughter watched. Emma crossed the room, sat on the floor beside my chair, put her head on my knee like she used to when she was little. Dad, she said. Her voice was so small. If Mom doesn't love you, does she even love me? Or am I just equity? Just another asset in her portfolio? The question broke something in my chest. I slid down onto the floor beside her, pulled her close. You are not equity, I said fiercely. You're not an asset. You're not a line item in anyone's portfolio. You're my daughter. You're the only thing in my life that was never a transaction. And that's not negotiable. That's not up for termination. That's not dependent on market conditions or strategic advantage. You're my daughter forever. Do you understand? She cried into my shoulder. I cried into her hair. I have to rewrite my Yale essay, she said after a long time. I can't write about our perfect family anymore. It was a lie. It wasn't all a lie, Emma. Some things were real. Are real. What things? I thought about it, about what we'd built, what couldn't be taken away. This, I said, you and me, right here. This is real. This counts. She nodded against my shoulder. We sat there on the study floor until the sun came up, until the darkness became gray, until morning broke whether we were ready or not. Rachel filed the divorce papers on a Wednesday morning. She called me at 9:15. It's done. I cited the prenup's infidelity clause, section 14C. Vivian forfeits all claims to marital property acquired during marriage. She pays you $500,000 in liquidated damages. And Jonathan, I filed the judicial ethics complaint with the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Judge Strauss is officially under investigation. How long until? It's already moving. His clerk called me 20 minutes ago, threatened sanctions if we don't withdraw. I told him to read Canon 2 of the Code of Conduct for United States judges. A judge should avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all activities. Your wife arguing cases while sleeping with him, that's not just appearance. That's actual impropriety. I stared out my office window at Harvard Yard. Students walking between classes, backpacks, coffee cups, normal life continuing while mine exploded. What about Emma? Strauss can't touch her. The ethics complaint is public record now. If he interferes with her college application, it becomes retaliation against a witness's family member. That's a federal crime. He won't see it that way. Then he's stupider than I thought. That afternoon, Rachel called again. Jonathan, I need you at the office. Now, Lawrence Marshall wants to give a deposition. Vivian's father? Yes, he called me directly, said he has something to say on the record. I drove to Rachel's office on Federal Street. She met me in the lobby, walked me to the conference room. Lawrence Marshall was already there on video link from his home office in Wellesley. 77 years old, retired appellate lawyer, distinguished career, 3 decades on the Massachusetts bar, and he was crying. "Professor Pierce," he said through the screen, "I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for what my daughter has done." "Mr. Marshall, you don't need to..." "Yes, I do." He wiped his eyes. "I need to say this on the record. Rachel, are we recording?" "Yes, sir," Rachel said. "This is a voluntary deposition given by Lawrence Marshall on March 15th, 2025, in the matter of Pierce versus Pierce." Lawrence looked directly at the camera. "3 days ago, my daughter Vivian called me. She said, 'Daddy, tell them Jonathan is having episodes. Tell them he's unstable. You're a respected lawyer in Boston. They'll believe you.' She wanted me to lie, to destroy Jonathan Pierce's reputation so she could control the divorce narrative." His voice broke. "I said no. I said, 'Vivian, I raised you better than this. Jonathan Pierce is one of the most stable, ethical men I know. You're the one who's lost her moral compass.'" Rachel leaned forward. "Mr. Marshall, why are you testifying against your daughter?" "Because she's wrong. Simple as that. I gave her everything, Andover, Harvard Law. I pulled strings to get her the ropes and Gray interview. I thought I was teaching her to succeed, but I never taught her character. That's my failure as a father." He looked at me through the screen. "Jonathan taught Emma character. I see that girl, 17 years old, writing essays about integrity, choosing truth over comfort. She has something Vivian never developed, and I refuse to let my daughter destroy that, or destroy you." "Mr. Marshall, she's my daughter," he continued. His hands were shaking. "I love her. I will always love her. But love doesn't mean enabling. Love doesn't mean lying to protect someone from the consequences of their choices." He paused. "If this testimony costs me my relationship with Vivian, so be it. She already cost herself mine." The screen went dark. Rachel stopped the recording. I sat there in silence. "That's the most devastating testimony I've heard in 20 years of practice," Rachel said quietly. "Her own father chose integrity over blood." "Will it matter?" I asked. "Jonathan, it's over. Vivian has no defense. The prenup is airtight. The phone records prove infidelity. The calendar proves judicial ethics violations. And now her own father just testified that she tried to get him to commit perjury." Rachel smiled grimly. "She's going to lose everything." 3 days later, I stood in front of 87 Harvard law students. It was Monday morning, constitutional law, 9 a.m., the same lecture hall where I'd taught about covenants and contracts 4 weeks ago, the same students. But everything was different. Emma was in the back row. She'd asked to come. I'd said yes. The room went quiet when I walked to the podium. They knew. Of course they knew. Above the Law had run the story that weekend. Harvard professor at Center of Judicial Ethics scandal. Wife's affair with Supreme Court nominee triggers federal investigation. 400,000 views in 2 days. I set down my burgundy leather moleskin. The coffee stain on the front cover looked darker somehow, more permanent. "Before we begin today's material," I said, "I need to address something personal." You could hear people shift in their seats. Laptop screens going dark, full attention. 4 weeks ago, I stood here and taught you about marital contracts, about the difference between contracts and covenants, about how contracts bind parties to terms, but covenants bind them to character. I paused. "I taught you theory. This week, I learned practice." Someone coughed. No one spoke. "My marriage ended. Not because the contract failed. The prenuptial agreement I drafted 20 years ago is working exactly as intended. It ended because only one person brought character to the covenant, and covenants can't survive that." I picked up the prenup from my desk, 67 pages in a Harvard crimson folder. "I wrote this document as an academic exercise. I was 24 years old, fresh out of my Supreme Court clerkship, about to get married. My fiancé insisted we needed a prenup. She was right, so I drafted one, carefully, thoroughly, and then I filed it away and forgot it existed." I opened to the blue tabbed section. Section 14C includes a liquidated damages clause for adultery, $500,000, preponderance of evidence standard. I don't remember writing that clause. But 24-year-old me protected 44-year-old me from a betrayal I couldn't imagine. I looked at the students, at their young faces, 22, 23, 25 years old, about to enter a profession that would test them in ways they couldn't predict. Here's what I want you to learn from this. The contracts you draft for your clients will protect them from things they can't see coming. Draft them well. Draft them carefully. Assume good faith, but prepare for its absence, because the people you're protecting, they're not just clients. They're human beings who will need your work to save them when their world falls apart. Maria, the student from the third row, raised her hand. Professor Pierce, you taught us that law should be reason-free from passion. Justice Ginsburg's quote, but was there passion in enforcing the prenup? I looked back at the credenza, at the RBG photograph. I thought about that, I said, and Justice Ginsburg said law is reason-free from passion, and for most of my career, I believe that. But this week, I learned something. The passion isn't in the law. The passion is in what the law protects. I'm passionate about my daughter, about protecting her from watching her father accept betrayal as the price of peace. The law gave me the reason. The passion gave me the courage to use it. The room was absolutely silent. The law was clear, I said quietly, even when my heart was confused. And that clarity, my voice wavered. That clarity was mercy. It protected me from tolerating what I couldn't survive. Someone started clapping, then someone else. Then the whole room was standing. 87 students on their feet, applauding. I looked at Emma in the back row. She was crying and smiling at the same time. Her phone was recording. Later, she told me that video got uploaded to Above the Law. Professor practices what he teaches was the headline. It has 800,000 views now. Turns out vulnerability is more viral than perfection. The consequences came swiftly. The Senate Judiciary Committee withdrew Judge Richard Strauss from Supreme Court consideration. The formal statement said concerns have been raised regarding judicial ethics that require thorough investigation before advancement can proceed. Translation? The nomination was dead. The First Circuit Court of Appeals opened a formal investigation. Strauss's wife filed for divorce 2 days later. Ropes and Gray's executive committee held an emergency meeting. Vivian was asked to resign her partnership. The conflict of interest was untenable. She opened a solo practice in a serviced office in Cambridge. 1 room, no associates. The Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers opened their own investigation into whether Vivian's conduct warranted disciplinary action. That one was still pending, and the prenup was enforced. Every provision. Vivian forfeited all claims to the Brattle Street townhouse, the vacation home in Maine, our joint investment accounts. She paid me $500,000 in liquidated damages. Her attorney tried to argue unconscionability. The judge took 15 minutes to rule against her. Mrs. Pierce is a senior partner at a major law firm, the judge said from the bench. She has practiced law for 18 years. She signed this agreement with full knowledge of its terms. The fact that she dislikes those terms now doesn't make them unconscionable. Petition denied. Emma rewrote her Yale essay. She showed it to me one evening in April. We were sitting in the kitchen, just the two of us. Takeout Chinese, spring rain against the windows. Want to read it? She asked. The pages still had her red pen marks, but the essay was completely different now. The prompt was the same. Describe a household where you learned your values. But her answer had changed. I read aloud. I learned integrity not from watching A Perfect Family, but from watching my father choose truth when lies would have been easier. When his marriage ended in betrayal, he could have hidden it, protected the facade, maintained the image of a perfect household for my college applications. Instead, he enforced the boundaries he'd set 20 years earlier in a prenuptial agreement he'd forgotten existed. He taught me that integrity isn't about never being hurt. It's about not accepting betrayal as the price of peace. That's the household where I learned my values, not the one I thought I had, but the one my father built from its ashes. I looked up at her. "Emma, this is true," she said. "It's true, Dad. And if Yale doesn't like it, then Yale doesn't deserve me." Yale loved it. The acceptance letter came in early May. Early decision, full acceptance, honors program invitation. The admissions officer's note said, "Your essay demonstrated mature moral reasoning and authentic self-reflection. We're excited to welcome you to Yale's class of 2029. Emma decided to defer enrollment for one semester. She wanted time to process, to heal, to not rush into the next thing just because the timeline said she should. I was proud of her for that too. One evening in late April, I made a reservation at the Harvard Faculty Club, the same place I'd planned to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. The reservation card was still in my desk drawer, that heavy crimson cardstock with gold foil lettering. I took it out, looked at it. Reserved, Pierce Party, 7:30 p.m., April 12th, 2025, 20th anniversary celebration. Emma found me holding it. "You were going to celebrate with Mom," she said. "I was, 6 weeks ago, before I knew." Emma took the card from my hand, flipped it over, wrote on the back in her handwriting, "Jonathan and Emma, honesty dinner." "Let's go anyway," she said, "just us." So we did. The faculty club dining room was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood paneling, oil portraits of dead professors, white tablecloths, the smell of old books and expensive wine. Other faculty members were there, Margaret Tillerson at a corner table with her husband, Dean Whitmore with the provost. They saw us, nodded, smiled. Some stopped by our table. "Jonathan," Margaret said. "Emma, I'm glad you're both here." "Thank you for the warning," I said quietly. "That day, about legal seafoods." "I just told you what I saw. You did the rest." She squeezed my shoulder and walked away. Emma and I ordered, talked, about Yale, about her gap semester plans, about summer. "Dad," she said over dessert, "thank you for bringing me here. I know this was supposed to be your anniversary dinner with Mom." "No, sweetheart, this is better. This is honest. This is what the reservation should have been all along." "I got into Yale," she said, "with the essay about you, about integrity." "I know. I'm proud of you." They loved that I told the truth, that I didn't pretend everything was perfect. "The truth is always better than the prettiest lie." She smiled. "That sounds like something you'd teach." "I'm teaching it now." We walked home through Harvard Yard. Spring evening, students everywhere, the smell of cut grass and possibility. Emma linked her arm through mine. "Dad, we're going to be okay, aren't we?" "Yeah, Emma, we're going to be okay." Spring semester, same lecture hall, same constitutional law seminar, but I was different. The students were different. The material was the same, but the understanding had deepened. Emma was enrolled at Harvard for the fall semester, her gap semester before Yale. She was taking 2 courses as a special student. One of them was my constitutional law seminar. She sat in the 3rd row, laptop open, taking notes like any other student. I stood at the same podium, the same burgundy moleskin with the coffee stain, the same RBG photograph on the credenza behind me, though now it had a second photograph beside it, Emma standing next to the RBG portrait, added for her Yale essay. "Today we're discussing marital contracts one more time," I said, "because some of you," I looked around the room, "several of you actually asked me to revisit the material after recent events." A few students smiled. Emma kept her expression neutral, professional. "Let's start with the fundamental question. Contracts bind parties to terms. Covenants bind them to character. We discussed this in February, but let's go deeper. I walked out from behind the podium. What happens when you choose covenant, but the other person chose contract? What happens when you bring character, and they bring strategy? Emma raised her hand. Yes, Miss Pierce. A few students glanced at her. Most knew she was my daughter. She'd been honest about it from day one. Professor Pierce, she said, her voice was steady, clear. You taught us that the law is clear even when the heart is confused. But you didn't teach us what happens when you choose covenant and the other person chose con. What happens then? The room went absolutely silent. I looked at my daughter, 17 years old, asking me the question I'd been asking myself for 2 months. You learn, I said slowly, that your character wasn't wasted. It was just misplaced. You gave it to someone who didn't value it, but that doesn't mean it had no value. It means they couldn't recognize value when they saw it. I paused. And then you get your character back. You reclaim it, and you give it to someone who deserves it. I looked directly at Emma. Like your daughter. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. The law is clear, I continued, even when hearts break, and that clarity, class, this is important. That clarity is mercy, not cruelty. It protects those who honor the law from those who don't. It creates boundaries that say this far and no further. It gives us the framework to rebuild when everything falls apart. Maria raised her hand. Professor, the prenup you drafted, Section 14C, the liquidated damages clause. When you wrote it, did you know you'd need it? No, I said. I thought I was writing an academic exercise. I thought I was being thorough. I didn't know I was writing a life raft for 20 years in the future. But you wrote it anyway. I wrote it anyway because that's what lawyers do. We prepare for disasters we hope never come. We draft for worst-case scenarios while praying for best-case outcomes. And when our clients need those documents 20 years later, when they're standing in the wreckage of what they thought was a covenant, those documents become the tools they use to rebuild. I walked back to the podium, picked up my moleskin. Justice Ginsburg told me that law is reason free from passion. I believed her. But I understand it differently now. The law gives us reason when passion would destroy us. The law gives us clarity when emotion would blind us. The law gives us justice when forgiveness would mean accepting injustice as the price of peace. I closed the journal, and that, I said, is why we do this work. Not because the law is perfect, but because it's clear. And clarity, when you're drowning, is the only thing that can save you. The class ended. Students filed out. Emma stayed behind, packing up her laptop slowly. When the room was empty, she came up to the podium. That was good, Dad, she said. Thank you for the question. It was perfect. I meant it. I wanted to know. I know you did. She picked up the RBG photograph from the credenza, looked at it. She was wrong about one thing, Emma said. Law isn't reason free from passion. Law is what gives reason to passion. It's what turns anger into justice, pain into accountability, betrayal into consequences. When did you get so wise? I learned from my father. She set the photograph down. Who learned from his mistakes? Who taught by living, not just lecturing? Jonathan and Emma redefined what family means that spring. Not who you're born to, but who shows up with integrity. Not the vows other people break, but the character you keep. If you've had to redefine family on your own terms, whether through divorce, loss, distance, or choice, tell me about it in the comments. Who showed up for you when blood ties didn't? And if this story moved you, subscribe. I tell true stories about finding strength in the fine print of life, the contracts we write, the covenants we keep, and the wisdom we earn when we choose integrity over comfort. I'll see you in the next one. That summer, Vivian had the baby, a girl, 8 pounds, 2 ounces, healthy. She called me once, asked if I wanted to know. No, I said, that's between you and Judge Strauss. He won't acknowledge her, Vivian said. Her voice was tired, small. His divorce stipulated no contact with me or the child. His wife's attorney made sure of that. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it, not for Vivian, but for the baby who didn't choose any of this. I'm placing her for adoption, Vivian said. Richard's sister and her husband, they've been trying to have children for 6 years. The baby stays in the family. She'll have a trust fund. I can visit twice a year. It's the best option. That sounds like a good choice, I said. For her. Jonathan. Vivian's voice cracked. I'm sorry. For what I said. For what I did. For all of it. I know. Will you ever forgive me? I thought about it. About forgiveness. About what it meant. Forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation, Vivian. I forgive you because holding anger would poison me, not because what you did was forgivable, but we're not going back. We're not friends. We're not co-parents beyond the legal minimum. We're just two people who used to be married, who learned different lessons from the same story. She was quiet for a long time. Emma won't talk to me, she said finally. Emma's protecting herself. You taught her that relationships are contracts, that people are assets. She's choosing not to sign on to those terms. I love her. Then show her differently than you showed me. But don't expect her to believe you quickly. Trust takes time. You spent 17 years teaching her one definition of love. It'll take a while for her to believe in another one. We hung up. I never spoke to Judge Strauss. Never needed to. The court system handled him. The ethics investigation concluded with a formal reprimand. No suspension, but permanent stain on his record. The Supreme Court nomination was dead. He'd peaked at Court of Appeals. His marriage ended. His reputation was damaged beyond repair. And every case Vivian had argued before him was appealed and reviewed by different judges. 2 were overturned. 1 was upheld. Justice, when it came, was thorough. Fall semester arrived. Emma left for Yale in late August. I helped her move into her dorm room, met her roommate, had lunch at a pizza place near campus. You're going to be great here, I said. I know. She smiled. Because I learned from the best. Your mother went to Yale Law. I wasn't talking about Mom. I hugged her goodbye in the parking lot, held on longer than I probably should have, but she didn't pull away. I love you, Emma. I love you too, Dad. Thank you for teaching me that love isn't the same as tolerance. That character matters more than comfort. That integrity is worth the cost. You learned that on your own. No, she said. I learned it from watching you. I drove back to Cambridge, back to the empty townhouse, back to my office at Harvard Law, but it wasn't empty. Not really. My textbook was getting a new edition. The publisher asked me to write an additional chapter. Personal application when theory becomes practice. I'm writing it now. The Harvard Law Review accepted my revised article. When marital contracts fail, a personal case study. Co-authored with no one, just my name. It's scheduled for publication in the spring issue. And the students, my God, the students, they created something I didn't expect. A new award. The Professor Jonathan Pierce Award for Professional Integrity, given annually to the Harvard Law student who demonstrates moral courage in the face of personal cost. The first recipient will be chosen this spring. Margaret Tillerson nominated Emma, but Emma declined, said she didn't want special treatment for being my daughter, said someone else deserved it more. That's how I knew she'd really learned. On the last day of fall semester, I taught the same constitutional law lecture one more time. The same material, contracts versus covenants, terms versus character. The lecture hall was full, standing room only. Word had gotten around that this was the class to take, not because of the material, because of the story. I stood at the podium with my burgundy moleskin. The coffee stain looked like a badge now, evidence of time, of survival. Contracts bind parties to terms, I said. Covenants bind them to character. We've been discussing this all semester, but let me leave you with one final thought. The room went quiet. The law is clear even when hearts break. That clarity is mercy, not cruelty. It's the boundary that says, I value myself enough to enforce consequences. I respect myself enough to demand respect. I love myself enough to refuse betrayal, disguised as compromise. I close the journal. That's what I hope you take from this class. Not just legal theory, but the understanding that the law, when used with integrity, protects the vulnerable from the calculating, protects the faithful from the fraudulent, protects those who bring character from those who bring strategy. I looked around the room at young faces, future lawyers, future professors, future judges. Go write good contracts for your clients. Draft them carefully. Protect people from betrayals they can't imagine yet. Because 20 years from now, someone will need the work you do today. And if you did it well, if you wrote with integrity and thoroughness and care, you'll save them. I picked up my materials. Class dismissed. Good luck on your finals. And remember, you're not just learning law. You're learning how to protect people when their world falls apart. The students stood and applauded, not because I'd taught them anything remarkable, but because I'd survived something terrible. And survival, with integrity intact, is its own form of teaching. I walked out of the lecture hall, across Harvard Yard, spring afternoon, cherry blossoms, students everywhere. My phone buzzed, a text from Emma. Dad, got an A on my first Yale law paper. Professor said my writing showed unusual maturity and moral clarity. Wonder where I got that. Love you. I smiled, typed back, love you too. You got it from yourself. I just had the privilege of watching. In my office, the RBG photograph still sat on the credenza. Law is reason free from passion. But next to it now, Emma's photograph. My daughter standing beside that portrait, her Yale acceptance letter in hand, her essay about integrity folded in her pocket. Two photographs, two interpretations of the same principle, both true, both necessary. I had office hours that afternoon. Students came with questions about marital contracts, about prenuptial agreements, about what happens when covenants fail. I answered every question, patiently, thoroughly, with examples I'd lived, because that's what teachers do. We take our pain and turn it into lessons. We take our failures and transform them into wisdom. We take our worst moments and offer them as roadmaps so others don't get lost the same way. The law was clear, even when my heart was confused. And that clarity saved me. It can save you too.